Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to All About Sports. Out of a NBA pool of 351 people who have been tested for the coronavirus since June 23rd, 25 have tested positive. The Nuggets, Clippers, and Heat have shut down their practice facilities following a round of positive tests, and the Brooklyn Nets have multiple players not participating in the restart for a variety of reasons, including the virus. Despite a surge of cases in Florida, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said this week he remains confident in the league's safety plan, but that a large spread of the virus could bring the season to a halt. I'm your host, Luca Vitale, and joining me today is the Joplin, Missourian, and Sam Walker. How you doing, Sam?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. All right, so let's get down to go with this. With the rise of COVID-19 cases in Florida, will the NBA continue its season?
I mean, I honestly have to say that they will. I can't see them going back at this point. It's almost too soon for them to cancel. They've gotten so many people's hopes up. They've spent so much money just preparing that facility, and there's so much money to be had in them continuing this season that from a financial standpoint, given the losses that they've already experienced this year, I can't see them going back.
Yep, you have a very good point here. So I'm going to talk about COVID a little bit, and then we can talk about the economic standpoint, because I totally agree with you here. So despite the recent surge in cases in Florida, like I said, you have to take this economic standpoint into account, because my opinion, before I even get going here, they should have had a plan B somewhere else. I mean, whether it was in Chicago, New York, etc.
Yes.
I mean, they should have done something at least. So I'm going to read you guys the COVID-19 cases in Florida itself last week. So we have June 29th through July 4th. June 29th, 5,266 new cases. Then we get to July 4th, 11,458 new cases in one day. This is one day, okay? And this actually shattered a record by New York in mid-April. This is insane. Florida has become the new epicenter of COVID, and this is due to Governor DeSantis' lack of discipline and lack of leadership, if you can call it that as well. All right, Sam, I mean, let's see if you can remember this. Do you remember when Florida was smirking at New York in April due to all their cases?
Oh, yes. I remember very, very clearly.
Yeah, and this is when Governor Cuomo, this is when he put the state on lockdown to flatten this curve. It's still New York's currently still in phase 2, and they're progressing very well, staying along that curve. Then you have Florida. New York's now looking at Florida saying, they were smirking us back then. You have Florida reopening their entire economy. I believe it was the second week of May. Mm-hmm. You look at the pictures on social media. You see people not social distancing. You see people not wearing masks. You see people gathering at concerts, restaurants, bars, the beach. Call it what you will. It is like an amusement park there. It's normal life. You would think there's not a pandemic hitting the country right now, sweeping its way through the southeast, southwest, and the south itself. It is ridiculous. So players are going to have to stay within this bubble, and they're not going to be able to see their families for 3.5 months. So take us away with the economic standpoint here.
I mean, so the pure decision of them doing it in Florida was based purely on economics. They have a great relationship with Disney, meaning they were able to do this whole isolation kind of lockdown for these players a little bit more affordably than they would be anywhere else. But I still have an issue with them doing it there just because Florida is known as a vacation spot where in the summer people have stopped caring about COVID. So even if, Disney parks themselves and these amusement parks don't open, people are going to be going to the beaches. They're going to be going to all these warm places. And so I think we're going to see an uprising, and I think it's going to be very difficult to get people there. But it's all about money at this point. If good legitimate reason, now they won't be punished either way by their teams or by the association is the claim, but they will have a pay cut. They're already getting a pay cut for not having played this season. Everybody is. They're already getting some percentages taken off, but they'll get even more taken off for not playing these games. And so for some players, even though they have multi-million-dollar contracts, it's still something they have to take into consideration. Are they willing to take that pay cut? And then the NBA has to look at what will they lose if they don't do this season? Merch sales have already gone down so much for the whole association just because these playoff games, which are usually so marketable because everybody wants to buy those t-shirts and buy those jerseys, you know, like get a Lakers finals shirt or whatever you want, or buy the jersey of their fave team if they're going to the playoffs or going to the finals. Those merch sales have gone way, way down. And in that way, the NBA is suffering. And they haven't been able to have those ticket sales. So, and even though they won't be able to have physical ticket sales either for these playoff games or for these finals games in the isolation kind of games, they'll still be able to do streaming, which will be a very, very marketable with advertisers. And advertisers will be very willing to fork over quite a bit of money to put some ads on those games because they know people will be watching because it's been months since they've been able to see a sporting event of that level.
You know, I'm definitely going to add to what you said. This is very, very good points you brought up here. So understand something. If happen to be, if the players back out at the last second, if these games are not played, the CBA or the collective bargaining agreement, it could be ripped up. Obviously, having to renegotiate another CBA of the crew losses that the NBA owners have already lost this year, along with the projected losses they're going to take into account in terms of advertising, revenue, and beyond that. These dollars are going to be curved significantly as a result because the money you are anticipating as a player to make this year is not going to be there. And to have to renegotiate a whole new deal, and make no mistake about this, if they have to go this far, the billionaire owners are going to push for a hard salary cap next year. And if the players happen to strike like they did back in 2011, the owners will be waiting out these players. They do not care. They are billionaires. And then you got players like, we'll take DJ Augustine on the Orlando Magic. He makes 1 point something million a year. They will wait players out like him, and guess who's going to suffer? The players.
Mm-hmm. Seeing like these, you know, especially like rookie players this year, this is going to hit them some of the hardest. You know, LeBron and Steph, they're going to take some serious pay cuts, but they still have multi-million-dollar contracts, so they'll still be raking in several million. But there's rookies who make maybe $1 million their first year, and that's going to be a severe cut for them. And like Zion from the New Orleans Pelicans, keep in mind, he paid for all of the workers at his stadium, paid for them to be covered during this time. And so if he gets a pay cut as well from that, that's going to hit him pretty hard just because he's already spent so much money.
Exactly. So it's really hard to almost assume that the season will be canceled because you have to take the economic standpoint into consideration. You have to take the CBA into consideration. You have to take the pay cuts into consideration. And then we'll get now into COVID because COVID, this is the only reason why this is happening within this bubble. So you have to wonder, will all players be 100% responsible during this? The answer to that, probably not. Because there are certain players within the league that are going to be there that will not be taking this as serious as others will be.
Yeah. You know, because there's going to be the rule that, like, you can't go into anybody else's rooms during this time. And I think that's going to be pretty hard to enforce. You know, sometimes you're just not even thinking about it. You want to go over and talk with a teammate real quick. That's not going to be something they're supposed to do or allowed to do. And whether teammates are going to follow that or not is going to be really, really difficult. And just seeing how they enforce it. Because let's face it, these are grown men. These are men who are in their late 20s, 30s, even, you know, stuff like that. They don't want to necessarily be controlled. And in this situation, they're going to be. And seeing how they react to that is going to be very, very interesting.
How also, another thing that will be interesting is how this bubble or even the playoffs will work out. Because like I said, what I said earlier on, I think it was in our other episode we did, Avery Bradley is going to be opting out for this season continuation. He has a 6-year-old son at home who has respiratory issues, and he opted out of the season. I definitely said he made the right decision there, because heaven forbid he comes home asymptomatic. Obviously, COVID affects people in different ways, whether it's with a cold, fever, or whatever you want to say. People that have respiratory issues, it's going to attack your lungs extremely quick, and it could be fatal. So that's why I give Avery Bradley the props and credit what he did, and I'm definitely glad he took the right decision or made the right decision here.
Yeah. I think this whole situation, especially with the COVID aspect, is going to have a deep impact on families. There's been some players who have just recently welcomed in some children into their lives, so a couple have opted out for that reason. But we also have to keep in mind, these are players who have just had several months to have pure family time, who've been isolated with their family, have gotten to spend more time than they've ever gotten to with these kids close by, without the practices, without the games, without having to go to away games and that sort of thing. And then to have them suddenly go into a 3.5 month isolation is going to be very, very, very rough on these families, just because it's not like their kids can go into the compound. Once they're into that compound, it's shut off. You can't go there. Everything's going to be due through like FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or just through phones. So I think that's going to hit them very, very hard. And I'm interested to see how this is going to affect them just like mentally in the mental health kind of sphere. Because, not only will they not have fans to cheer them on, but they don't even have their family there. And most of them are used to having that aspect.
So I like how you mentioned this, because I found two different players' aspects, how their lives are a little bit different here. So let me read you something here via ESPN. So Kemba Walker, he is a point guard for the Boston Celtics. Quote, I think everyone's situation obviously is just different. Obviously, some guys have families and kids, wives, For me, I'm a single man with no kids, so I'm going to be fine. All I do is stay home in the house anyway, so there's nothing wrong with me staying in a room. Okay, so obviously Kemba Walker, he doesn't have any kids, so all he needs to do is just take responsibility for himself. When he goes back home, there's nothing really to worry about unless he happens to see people back at home. Then we have someone in DJ Augustine. Quote, leaving family is probably the most challenging part for me, especially right now. A few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, my father-in-law passed away. So my wife, she really needs me right now. But at the same time, she understands what I need to do for my job and for our family.
Yeah.
So I got to say something about that. It is very hard for certain players, because when I read that, I'm like, that's a very good point, because you have to worry about two things: providing food for your family and getting that paycheck, and making sure your family is in a safe environment. So it's really hard for certain players to do that, because there are certain players who have opted out and left that money on the table because they don't want to take that risk.
Yeah. So like one of the first players came to mind, and it's different because he will not be playing there just because his team has not made it. Like, let's think of like Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. I'd be interested to see what he would have done in this situation, because he's very much about the game. He's about playing. He just came back from an injury, so he really wants to prove himself, but he is the definition of a family man. He has young children. He's 3 young children that he's extremely close to, and he's talked about how it's extremely difficult for him to go and do these away games. And sometimes for away games, he's only gone for like a week at max. So 3.5 months is far, far different. So I think for these family guys who are very close with their kids, it's going to be very, very difficult to them. Like even these ones who are used to having a big social life, they won't have that.
Right. And not only is it just that too, but it's also those that are anticipating maybe their first or second child during this 3.5-month period. I know someone on the Brooklyn Nets, I forgot which player it was though, but he's going to have his first child. And I think his wife is doing early September. It's not like the Nets are gonna get there anyway. But the point is I'm trying to make here is being there for your first child. You cannot just stay for, even though you have the love for the game, I understand that, but you have to be there for your first child's birth. And he chose that over the love of the game. So I understand that and I respect that. The thing is though, is when he comes back, he's going to have to quarantine himself for 2 weeks. So that way he doesn't want to get the little kid sick, because it's also fatal in that regard as well.
Yeah. And like they plan on not having anybody leave the compound whatsoever, even if they get injured. There's reports of them, they're moving MRI and X-ray machines, and they're getting very high-ranking doctors to be able to do anything they need to do should a player get injured, because they don't want to have to move them on at all. They don't want anybody coming in and nobody coming out for during this time. So, and any contact that they have, even like food shipments and that sort of thing, is going to be extremely limited, and players will be nowhere near it. And so it's going to be really, really interesting. And just like the level of isolation that they're planning, there is no leaving to go see family. There's no family coming to see you. So like those moments you have to pick which one is most important for you. And like, even just now, teams are struggling with, quarantining for the 14 days. So, like, the one that comes to mind is like the Toronto Raptors. They're the only NBA team that's not, homed in the USA. They're homed in Canada. And they have players that are both in Canada and the USA as of this moment. And so anybody who goes into Canada, so they wanted to go to those training facilities in Canada, they have to quarantine for 14 days before they can start anything.
Correct. That's a very good point. And that also has to tie in with team chemistry as well. Because some, like you said, they live in Toronto, or even other parts of Canada, and others live in the US. So that's another thing you have to take into consideration, even though if you're Zooming or having team meetings virtual, having to practice too. It's a big time commitment in building that team chemistry, even competing. I mean, I didn't even think the Toronto Raptors would be even this good this year because they lost Kawhi Leonard, but look at them. They did a very nice job throughout the season. Yes, they lost Kawhi Leonard, but the rest of the team, I would say, is about the same, but Kawhi Leonard was that chip to get them to the championship last year, but kudos to them where they are right now.
Yeah. Like, they have a lot of concerns, because not only are they traveling extremely far to get to Florida if they're going to do it, but they have players coming from all over. And so being able to make sure that all of their players are healthy and safe and able to do it in a safe manner, it's going to be really interesting. And like, I think it's going to be interesting seeing just getting them to Orlando.
Right.
It's going to be really interesting seeing how they're going to travel all of these people from all across the country to get to this facility. And maintain that they're safe and that they're not, in contact with anything. I just don't understand how they're going to be able to do it super safe, but I think it's almost too late for them to back out at this point.
Yeah, it is a little too late. And like I said, the losses they would suffer, that's even worse. So, I mean, they should have maybe had a plan B or even plan C in the back of their pocket, somewhere like in Chicago, New York, I don't know, just somewhere that they could have a backup plan. But anyway, guys, this will conclude our episode. And Sam, thanks for joining me again today. Everyone, thanks for watching another episode Just Talking About Sports, and we'll see you later on.